Today, we're going to talk about the overt narcissists' motivation in child custody court. Okay. So I'm kind of doing a little series here where I'm talking about the different types because the motivation for each one is slightly different. And it's important to understand because there's different ways to sort of get the upper hand depending on who you're dealing with, but you got to know your audience, right? That's really, really important. Before we dive into this topic, let me just remind you, if you like the content and find it helpful, don't forget to hit like on this video. Also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. So when we're talking about an overt narcissist, this is probably kind of the version of narcissism that we all think of when we are, thinking about narcissists in general. It's kind of that really like just out there, overbearing, grandiose, kind of arrogant, entitled, and just unapologetic. Like, this is me, here I am, this is who I am, and take it or leave it, kind of thing. So they tend to be really full of themselves and really sort of confident. I mean, it's interesting because below the surface, they're really not as confident as that. They're usually very insecure and all the things that we normally talk about that are kind of the root of narcissism. But the way that they sort of play it off is by appearing very entitled, very grandiose, very full of themselves, very arrogant in that kind of way. The thing that's interesting about this when you're dealing with somebody like this in court is really what you want to do is let them fall on their sword, so to speak. Because what happens is they're so outwardly confident in themselves that they really think that they can just go in there and show up and manipulate the situation to their benefit and just go on about their life. And this is why I talk about, like, if you can really be documenting and be methodical and be doing all the things that you need to do, eventually you're going to unravel this. Okay. Now, they might make a good first impression or they might whatever, but honestly, you staying on your paces, holding your boundary, doing your documentation, just continuing to sort of, it's like the tortoise and the hare kind of analogy where the narcissist is kind of the hare and they might come in with this big, bragging whirlwind type of thing. But really the tortoise's consistency, reliability, and all those things are what ultimately win the race. And I think that's true in child custody cases from what I've observed with my clients who are dealing with this kind of situation. And I think that one of my examples that if you've been following me for a while, you may have heard before, but this is one of my personal examples with my ex-husband is I remember that in the very beginning, I got an attorney and we sat down with my attorney in the very beginning, kind of jointly. She was going to help us try to, figure things out and come to agreement and whatever. And that was in like probably, I don't know, June or July of that year. And he and I had kind of reached agreement on what he was going to pay me each month and all that kind of thing. And then he missed like 2 payments during that time. And I finally called up my attorney and said, hey, I can't do this. Like, I can't survive with the kids without his financial help. And I really need to make sure this doesn't happen. So she was like, okay, well, we're going to have to file on child support and spousal support. So she did. She filed a motion on child and spousal support. Now, we had not actually gone in and had any custody filings. We hadn't had any disagreements on that because, I primarily had the kids and he just kind of showed up around his work schedule or their events that he, coached at. He coached sports and did some different things. And so his schedule was just kind of around all that kind of thing. And he and I hadn't had any disagreements about that. So we hadn't filed on custody yet. So we filed on child support. And I remember it very clearly. We went in December of that year for a child support order. I had filed for the divorce originally, and then he didn't even file a response to the divorce. And then my attorney files for this support motion. He didn't respond to the support motion at all, right? So he didn't go through any of the required steps that are required for everybody, right? Everybody has to respond if you get a petition against you. We have to respond if somebody files a motion. That's just normal court procedure. But he believed himself to be above all this kind of thing. And like he didn't have to do any of that. And that I guess he believed nothing was going to happen to him if he just refused to participate in the process. So we go into court and he actually shows up for that hearing. And he walks in like his best 3-piece pinstripe suit, right? He's got it all together. He's by himself. He's not represented. And he just comes into court just like he owns the place. And we start going into the proceeding or whatever. And the judge is asking my attorney questions. Of course, we're the ones that filed the motion. So he's asking her for, input on the situation and the numbers and all the stuff for child support. And he starts running calculations and things. And so my ex-husband pipes up and he says, "Your Honor, can I say something?" And the judge kind of stopped and he goes, "Well, I'll let you say something, but the fact is you haven't filed your response and to the petition. You didn't file a response to this motion. And I really can't consider anything that you say." And so, my ex-husband goes, "Okay." And he just proceeded with his comments since the judge told him that he could speak, even though the judge already told him he wasn't going to consider any of it, because I think he believed if he just said the right thing or he was reasonable or he was whatever was going through his head as the description, if he fit that the judge would listen to him, right? Any reasonable person, any fair person is going to listen to him, except for the judge. It's like, well, you didn't follow these procedures. So actually, I legally can't even consider anything that you're going to say because you haven't even appeared in front of this court yet because you haven't filed your response, right? So the court has jurisdictional issues over what gives them power over who. And they don't have power, in certain regards to listen to his part or whatever until he actually files a response and says, "Hey, here I am. I'm appearing in the case." But again, he thought that he was above all of this. And so he proceeded to say his piece on what he thought about the support and how he couldn't survive and he didn't have enough money and all of these things. And the court said, "Okay, thank you." And then the court took the information that my attorney had provided, which included his pay stubs and my pay stubs, and they ran a calculation and the court said, "Okay, here's the support." And then I think once we walked out of there, he knew at that point that the court wasn't going to, that he wasn't going to be able to just get up there and schmooze the court and just get what he wanted. That there were procedural things that needed to happen that he didn't know how to do, didn't understand, whatever, couldn't afford an attorney. And he sort of just buried his head from that point on. And the rest of the process just went through kind of without him. He's just like, whatever. And of course, then he was angry about, what ended up happening because he didn't like the outcome, but frankly, he didn't participate. That's a very quick version of falling on your sword, right? Like it didn't take a long time with him because after that one kind of event not going his way, then that just sort of took the wind out of his sails. Now, I don't think they all go that quickly. It depends on the person that you're dealing with and the level of narcissism and all those kinds of things. But this is something that classically happens with overt narcissists is they either think that they're going to prevail in front of the judge or even in front of a child custody expert. I had a client a few years back whose ex-husband, this was a female client, her ex-husband was extremely narcissistic to the point where they had a child custody eval and the evaluator came back. I've talked about this case before too. The evaluator came back and said, "This father is completely incapable of putting his children's needs above his own because of the level of narcissism involved." And this again was a guy that just came out very overt, very attacking, very aggressive, and just like scorched earth policy, like I'm going to win and there's nothing you can do. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to talk to the judge and I'm going to do all these things and you're going to lose. It was that kind of mentality. And it took longer for this person to kind of, hit the point where he realized that he wasn't going to be able to just charm his way through this. And I think that took going to the custody eval. So it was obviously a much longer trajectory than mine, but it's the same theory. So the thing is you just have to wait until you get to the point where they do hit that wall. And in the meantime, you have to be conducting yourself in all the ways that we talk about with proper communication, interaction, doing things the way the court wants you to do so that you're preserving your own credibility and the court's perception of you. And then just kind of stepping back and letting this narcissist do his thing or her thing and not let it put you in a state of fear of, oh my gosh, they're going to convince people. Usually that doesn't really work. When they're that charmer kind of thing, that doesn't usually work. You can pull them apart really easily on procedural stuff most of the time because they think they're above it. That's one of the ways you get the advantage. Okay. So I hope that's helpful for you. If you'd like to learn more about this kind of, psychological warfare, which is really what you're in the middle of, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's information on that page about my group coaching programs for moms and for dads. And there's also information on my premium one-on-one VIP services if you have an extremely complex case or you feel like you're just really needing that extra intense level of support right now. All right. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.